and those joining us remotely and online, you're very welcome to the October meeting of the Planning Committee. I have one apology for Councillor Thomas O'Reilly. Any further apologies? Okay. Item 2 then is to sign the minutes of the previous meetings held on the 22nd of September 2021 and the 28th of September 2021. And item 3, members, is any declarations of interest? Councillor McClahary?
Yeah, I've previously indicated a declaration of interest in LA 10/2021/0684F. So this continued from the last time.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Item 4 then is any matters arising. And no matters arising, then we'll move on then to item 5, and that's to consider one file for decision by the Planning Committee, and that's paper A for your reference. So the officers are going to take us through that thing.
Okay, thank you, everybody. My name is Martin, and I'm going to do paper A here today. So paper A is application. Paper A application number 1 is LA 10/2019-1156. The proposal is an amendment to an overall tip height of a consented Murley wind farm. So this is for 2 turbines, and the increase in height is from 126.5 meters to 149.9 meters. The proposal also includes a variation in the lifespan of the wind farm from 25 years to 35 years. The applicant is Renewable Energy Systems Limited, otherwise known as RES. The recommendation is to approve planning permission. Okay, sorry. Okay, you can see on the map, the Murley wind farm is located between Vintana and 5 Mile Town. It's approximately 4.5 miles from both locations. Now, if you can see on your screen, the outline is actually in blue, and if you look very closely to the left-hand side, you can see the 2 turbines that are for consideration today. That's T1 and T2. This particular application is between both Fermanagh Omagh Council and Mid-Ulster Council. The boundary is just, our 2 turbines are just situated right on the boundary. There are 7 turbines in Mid-Ulster and obviously 2 for Omagh. The 7 turbines in Mid-Ulster have been decided by their planning committee in September 2021, and they've been approved. So you can have a look at the blue background or the blue boundary, and you'll see there that the majority of it is actually within Mid-Ulster Council. But for this application, it's the two round circles to the left-hand side, and they're in Fermanagh Noma's council area. So as I said previously, there was a planning application approved here in under K 2015-0066, and it approved 2 turbines in the exact same location as the present proposal. The turbine base to tip height was 126 metres. The latest proposal sees that increase to 149 metres. So effectively, a very similar looking turbine, similar looking on the ground, but 25 metres or so larger. Now, this map here shows the 2 turbines in question and their location and their proximity to each other. So if you note just above it, you can see a number of other red crosses and with circles. That's actually another wind farm. So this is commonly known probably as the 5 Mile Town wind farm, but that actually makes up 3 different individual wind farms: Lentram's Bridge, Hunters Hill and Scragga wind farm. And Murley would become the 4th wind farm up there. So whenever you're on that road and you see the wind farm, you probably read them all as one cluster, as one big wind farm, but that's not the case. There's 3 wind farms built, and obviously a 4th one, which, as I said before, actually has planning permission and they can commence development, but they're just in now to make it bigger. And obviously T3, 4, 5, and the rest are actually in Mid-Ulster. So again, that's just another map showing what was approved. So you can see there's very little difference between both locations. In fact, they're both in the exact same position. And this one probably breaks down the 2 council areas. So left-hand side of the line, of the yellow line, is Fermanagh Noma, so the 2 turbines in red, and all the ones in purple to the right are Mid-Ulsters. Okay, so actually you can see, go back, yes, on this one here, the ground level, above sea level, both turbines are approximately 230 metres above sea level. Further up to the north of this, you can see that the above sea level increases. So the majority of the other turbines on the other wind farms are all situated around 270 to 280 metres above sea level. These particular turbines aren't as large as what is proposed today, and them turbines were built a number of years ago, and they're considerably smaller in terms of their output capacity, but they are situated on higher ground, and probably hence the need why these turbines have increased in height. The proposal from Fermanagh Noma Council's area actually takes use of the existing infrastructure. So the existing access to the existing wind farms will be used, the existing paths and tracks that are already in place to a point. And you can see on the plan that there will be a new track and new paths made for T1, T2. So this doesn't involve any major infrastructure through new land. It's all there from previous, and they're just using what they already have in place. With any wind farm or any new turbines on a wind farm, there's obviously some infrastructure over and beyond the access. So what we have here is a temporary compound, which is located just to the north of T1 and T2. So that's used to be used by the turbines company, as obviously it's a different owner than the other wind farms. So Murley is run by RES, and the other wind farms are by different companies. And obviously it's a substation building as well, which will go with that. So suppose the best way to kind of analyze the impact upon the wider area is to look at some critical views. Now, bearing in mind that the 2 turbines that you can see in front of you have already been approved, and we're just looking at the extra height difference. So you can see from Clabby forest, which is located halfway between 5 Mile Town and Fintona. There's a potential view of the 2 turbines. It's interesting to note on the top plan that you can see all the other consented and constructed wind turbines. So Lantrams Bridge, Hunters Hill and Scragga. And obviously you can see the impact that these turbines will have in the wider landscape and in the horizon. So that's interesting to note. If you look to the right hand side of that photograph, you'll see 3 or 4 of the turbines which have recently been approved in Mid-Ulster, which are the same height, and it's the same proposal effectively. This is another critical viewpoint. This is taken from St Mary's Primary School near in Tempo Village actually, so it's quite an elevated site. And this photograph just shows the context of the wider wind farm on the landscape. You know, from these positions, usually when you look across a hilltop, you normally see small turbines, but it's completely undiscernible really which turbine is which and the size and the number of them. So I think this montage actually it shows you that really the impact of the turbines on this landscape is hard enough to work out when you compare it to what's already there. And perhaps maybe one of the biggest critical views will be when you're traveling from 5 Mile Town to Fintona. So it's over the mountains, people probably locally would know it. It's called Murray Road and it runs in eventually to Ecclesville Road. So this is probably around about 4 miles from 5 Mile Town. The wind farm becomes very apparent as you're driving up the hill. So we're in a FODC, our turbines are over to the left here. So you can see the landscape is slightly lower, the topography is slightly at a lower level than the existing wind farm. Mid-Ulster's turbines are to the right-hand side of the road, but also actually to the bottom left-hand corner of that photograph as well. So the council boundary cuts across the road and cuts back again. So it's all very close here to the Mid-Ulster boundary. But yes, that's the approximate location of the turbines in the FODC area. You may have read the report, and in section 7C, there was a section from DFC, so that's a Historic Environment Division, and they talked about the fact that they did not get a planning consultation. Now, in the previous planning application for both Mid-Ulster and Omagh, they were not consulted, and indeed, in this application, they weren't consulted, and the reason for that was because within the boundary of the planning application, there was no monuments or listed buildings near the proposed turbines. In fact, the nearest monument is over 3 kilometres away. And indeed the listed building as well, there's nothing in the nearby vicinity. So that's the reason why we haven't went along and consulted HED. We are fairly content that what siting of the turbines, given the existing turbines that are already up there, and given the extant permission that's there, there won't be any impact.
Thank you, Martin. I now invite at this point, and I welcome representation by Ms. Adele Burke, the agent for this application. You're very welcome, Ms. Burke. For this part of our meeting, there's 10 minutes allocated. So in your own time, you can make a start, and I'll maybe flag up when we're approaching the 9.5 minute mark.
Yep, no problem. Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to address the Planning Committee. I'm Adele Burke, Senior New Sites Manager with RES Limited, the applicant. I'm also representing
Seem to
the
have
land.
sound here. Sorry.
Oh.
Can't hear the sound in the chamber.
Can you hear
Just
me
maybe
now?
try again. Sorry, bear with us here.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. No, still no sound here.
Is that any better? Can you hear me now?
The mic appears to be live here, but we can't hear any sound yet, sorry. We're just going to get IT to resolve this matter, so apologies.
No worries.
Chair,
Members, maybe while we wait, we could move ahead to agenda item 7. These are content, and that's to note the schedule of planning decisions issued in September 2021. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to propose accordingly.
Have a second. We've got Councillor Robinson.
second.
Okay, thanks, members. And item 8 on our agenda then is to note the update report on planning enforcement in September 2021. And that's paper D for your information. Councillor Irvine proposed to note, and Councillor Thompson. Yeah, no problem. And members, we've moved to maybe item 10 there, which is to consider the quarterly update on live planning caseload reports. That's paper F for your information. Councillor Irvine
Happy to propose noting, Chair. Thank you.
and Councillor Thompson.
Second the noting, Chair.
And item 11 was to consider update report on planning performance statistics for the first quarter 2021 to 2022. That's paper G. I believe, am I right, this came before one of our committees recently, the G perhaps. Councillor McGuire? Yeah, we'll just maybe ask Paul to take us through that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to run members quickly through the report. Agenda item 11, paper G, and it's a report to provide members with an overview of planning performance for the first quarter of 2021-22, which is April to June. And just to note, members, that these are provisional figures and may be subject to revision ahead of finally being published in July. It's noted within the report that COVID has had an impact on performance, but it seems to be lessening as time goes forward. And I suppose just to pull out the 3 key headline notes in terms of the performance. In terms of local applications, in Q1, officers managed to achieve that target, and the processing target was 14.6 weeks, which was within the 15-week target. The Northern Ireland average was 15.8 weeks, and that was a very positive achievement. terms of major applications, there was none determined within Q1. And in terms of enforcement, the target is 70% in 39 weeks. And for our own processing, we managed 68% within the, which is just slightly outside the target. So paragraphs 2.10 and 2.11 also set out the performance in terms of non-statutory indicators, and the papers just for noting for members.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Very positive indeed, and I'm sure on behalf of the committee, I would commend all the staff in our planning department for their work, which a lot of it obviously goes unseen. Moving forward in a difficult climate at times. Councillor Maguire.
Just to propose the noting of the report.
And Councillor Irvine.
Happy to second. Just noting, I think if you look at the statistics coming through for last month, our approval rate is sitting quite high. We're either second, I think it is, out of the 11 councils. Comment back on that quickly. One, officers obviously doing a good job. Two, agents are obviously reading the pack and giving enough information and are actually putting applications in on behalf of their applicants that are actually policy compliant, which is always good. So hopefully the message is getting through. If it doesn't tick the boxes, it won't get through the screening. So tick the boxes and it'll go through properly. So good to see, and send the message back out to the people there. We are willing to do work, but make sure it's policy compliant. Thank you.
So we're going to return hopefully to where we were in item 5. Just going to maybe check have we have any sound.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and
Yep,
clear, Adele.
You guys can hear me?
So we've
Uh,
heard Councillor Rennie. Maybe Ms. Burke, could you maybe check is your microphone unmuted there?
Yeah, it is unmuted. I think Alan can hear me. I'm not sure if the guys in the chamber can.
It appears to be unmuted at this point, but we can't hear. Yep. Just do a few more tests here.
Chair? Would I suggest we go on to 12.1 then? If we're doing technical details, the majority are in the room and we can go on with
We
business.
We can proceed on to 12.1, which was
Correspondence.
correspondence. Do any correspondence? We have, yep, sorry. Have. Okay, Paul.
Yeah, so the correspondence relates to the withdrawal of the plan, the plan and advice note. Members will remember that we had presented plan to the previous planning committee back in September, and it was resolved that we would write to the minister seeking the withdrawal of the plan and seeking confirmation that the consultants will come down and have a meeting with members. And in between times, we have got correspondence from Mr. Angus Kerr, the chief planner, just noting that the plan has now been formally withdrawn by the minister.
Okay, Councillor McAuliffe.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Can I propose the noting of the correspondence? And I also want to welcome the withdrawal of the planning advice note. The committee took a stance, you know, we made our views known, the council did likewise, in a corporate formal sense. This this advice note should not have been issued in the first place. As far as many are concerned, the legislation, the policy is already restrictive, and to tighten the screw further and to reduce opportunities for people to live in the countryside was a retrograde step. So it was anti-rural in character as far as many people are concerned. And I would be concerned as to where it came from in the first place. You know, who surfaced this and why? What's the agenda behind it? But at least now it's withdrawn. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, I'm not going to repeat everything that Barry said there, but agree with everything he said there. And I'm just glad that it has been withdrawn. And I say it was pressure came on from councils like ourselves and other councils to withdraw. So I'm just happy to second it.
Okay, Councillor Irvine.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'll just make a comment and go off slightly on a tangent. For those that are sci-fi fans, particularly Star Trek, the word "the collective" should come into mind, and I think it is shown that when you become a collective rather than an individual, the power of persuasion is supremely evident, and this is what happened. We all, as 11 councils, probably Belfast slightly muted, but the other 10 with regard to a rural presence, spoke as a single collective and voiced their total opposition in regard to the issue of this plan. And I think that in itself was the paramount force for actually having it withdrawn. Because I do believe that the minister was actually informed by our officials, and our officials took a stance without actually trying to take guidance from those councils that actually have to deliver on the policy. So all I can say is well done, everybody collectively. And just watch science fiction. There's lessons to be learned there as well. Thank you.
Okay, well,
The Borg.
I've never seen Star Wars, but I think I will be watching it. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I will support the colleagues in the Planning Committee with regard to their comments, and I welcome it. I suppose it's worth noting also that our former council colleague, Councillor Deborah Erskine, as she was, now MLA Erskine from Manor South Tyrone, did refer to the very issue in her maiden speech in Stormont 2 days ago. So that's all to be welcomed as well. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, members. Other items of correspondence? Yep, we can do that, yeah. Problem.
Okay, members, we'll do agenda item 9, paper E, while we're waiting. And this paper just gives an update to members on planning a appeal decisions during September 21. There was one appeal decided by the Commission, and that was application LA10 2020 03600. And the development was a proposed dwelling and garage under CTY 2A of PBS 21. The location was approximately 20 metres northeast of 138 Tullyneal Road and 30 metres northwest of 11 Mullislin Road, Omagh. The applicant was Donald Ward. The application was refused by the Planning Committee in October 2020. The decision was heard by the Commissioner Kerr, who dismissed the appeal on the 22nd of September 2021. So suppose just running members through the headline points of the Commissioner's assessment. And the determination. One, the Commissioner found that whilst there was other houses in the immediate area, they did not form part of the group, given the physical separation distance. There wasn't a cluster of 4 or more buildings, excluding garages and outbuildings. A T-junction, which was located close by the site, was not considered as a crossroads. And the Commissioner also pointed out that the word "or" between the policy options indicated the crossroads in itself was not a focal point. Commissioner also pointed out that the site wasn't bounded on at least two sides with other development, was bounded on two sides by road, and development of the site would not round off or consolidate. It would actually protrude further development on the countryside. The proposal was also sustained in terms of CTY 8 and CTY 14. Urban development and rural character. The appeal wasn't subject to any costs. The appeal was upheld, and the decision was dismissed. There was a map there, members included within the reference, and recommendation is just to note the appeals date.
People, Councillor Garrity.
Thank you, Chair, and Paul for that, and I'm happy to propose recommendations as we note the update report on the appeal. Thank you.
Councillor. Have a seconder to note here, Councillor Irvine. Okay, so not sure if we've resolved the technical issue, but maybe if we have, I propose maybe a recess at this point.
Chair, can you hear me? It's Bert Wilson here.
10 minutes?
Hello, Glenn.
Maybe go for 10 minutes.
Glenn.
Councillor Irvine, you want to propose that?
I'll propose, but I'm just asking a question. Of the remaining called-in files, do they all have speaking rights?
Glenn.
Yeah, and yep.
All three of them? Yep.
Have, yeah.
Okay, I propose the recess.
Yep. Seconded by Councillor Feely. Thank you.
Glenn, could I have a word, please?
And we're going to return to, hopefully we can get connected with our speaker, Miss Bennett. Miss Burke, sorry, Miss Burke. Just get me a list of names here.
Can you guys hear me now?
Hopefully we can hear you okay, that's
You can hear me
brilliant.
now. That's
So we have 10 minutes here if you want to go ahead in your own time.
good. Yeah, no problem. So good afternoon and thank you for allowing me to address the Planning Committee. I'm Adele Burke, Senior New Sites Manager with Res Limited, the applicant. I am also representing the landowners as this is of great importance to them, their families and communities. In planning terms, the 9-turbine Murray wind farm covers the 2 council areas, Fermanagh and Omagh and Mid Ulster. Turbines T1 and T2 are located in the Fermanagh and Omagh District Council and 7 turbines T3 to T9 in the Mid Ulster Council. We have demonstrated that Murray is a well-designed project which is in line with all the policy objectives in PPS 18 renewable energy, and the Council Planning Officer shares this view. The application will generate significant economic and sustainable development benefits for the region. We have estimated that approximately £7.1 million will be invested into the Northern Ireland economy during the construction, with approximately 30% of this being invested locally through supply chains opportunities. For instance, RES have a long-standing relationship with the Omagh-based building contractor W&H Alexanders, who have constructed almost all of our wind farms in Northern Ireland over the last 20 plus years. The rates payable for T1 and T2 are £43,000 per annum, or £1.5 million over the 35-year lifetime of the project, supporting the council to deliver the strategic outcomes identified in the Fermanagh and Omagh Community Plan. This application supports Fermanagh and Omagh's transition to a more sustainable, low-carbon future. Onshore wind is now the lowest cost of generation, bar none. The total 9-turbine low-carbon energy project can meet the needs of the demands of around 16,700 homes every year, equivalent to 40% of the houses in the Fermanagh and Omagh District Council area. In summary, this project has been subject to comprehensive environmental studies which have been assessed by all the statutory consultees, none of whom have objected. No third-party objections have been received, and the local planning officer has also recommended for approval. Taking these facts into account, the planning balance is overwhelmingly in the favour of approving this application, and we respectfully ask the Planning Committee to do so. Thanks for listening. Thank you.
Sorry, we have an opportunity for members now to ask any questions to Ms. Burke in relation to the application. Councillor Feely.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for that presentation, Martin, before that, and Ms. Burke there. I was just wondering what the change in the 2 windmills, the bigger windmills higher, and they'll probably be more heavier. I was just, would there be any indication of safety? Because I know there was issues with windmills at Mayo Wood, Donegal, and being on, it's probably on bog ground, those landslides and stuff like that. There was all that taken into consideration. Would there be any safety issues like that there? That's all I was just wondering. Thank you.
Thank you. We have provided a peat slide risk assessment for this application. We actually have recently just redone it again based on the bog burst that was in Donegal. We have has one under numerous and vigorous testings for to make sure that that kind of thing doesn't happen again. And the site definitely is suitable ground for these turbines. So with regards to safety, there's very minimal risks.
Okay. Any other questions for the agent at the moment? At this point, really, it's the only opportunity we'll get if anyone has any questions. Okay, nobody is indicating. I trust nobody's indicating from remotely. Don't have sight of that just at present. Well, then in that case, thank you for taking the time to speak to the committee, Ms. Burke, and we're now going to move on and invite any comments or questions for advice from our officers. Or if members are content, we have a recommendation. Councillor Garrity.
Thank you very much, Chair, and Martin, for the report. No, it's quite an extensive report, and I think all the questions that anyone would need would be are in it and in the presentation given by Martin. Thank Ms. Burke for her presentation as well, but I would be happy to move to propose recommendations to approve. Chair, at this stage, thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Robinson.
Second that recommendation.
So are we all in agreement, members?
Chairman, if you allow me to come in as a
Yes.
councillor of West Tyrone,
Yes. Go ahead, Councillor.
I'm happy to support that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Rainey. Yeah, okay, and I just asked, we're all in agreement, I think, so I'll ask Martin just to sum up.
So application 1, L 2010 or LA 10 2019 1156 was a full application to increase the turbine height for an already consented wind farm at Murley. The recommendation was to approve planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to 13 conditions. Members have granted permission subject to these conditions.
Okay, item 6 then is to consider 3 files called in for decision by the planning committee. That's paper B for members' information. I should note that Councillor Wilson has declared an interest. I want to record that in relation to application 1 LA 10 2020 /1033F. That's the proposed rear extension, canteen, toilet block, and access to Eurospar with removal of 1-3 at proposed access. So that is recorded. And I'm also note that there is representation received. There will be representation received in support and in support of the application and in support of objectors, and that'll be taken in due course. And I ask Darren to take us through the application.
Good afternoon, members. So paper B then, application number 1 is LA 10 2020 1033. It's a full application by Mr. McKernahan at Main Street, Fintna, for proposed rear extension, canteen, toilet block, and access to Eurospar, and also includes the removal of 1 tree at the access, which is currently protected by a tree preservation order. So I'll just go through the details then on the screen. You can see the slide indicating the site area outlined in red. So it's an extensive site with frontages onto the 2 roads. The main street then is in the bottom right of the slide. The extension then is in yellow with the additional 2 new buildings as well shown on the screen. The aerial photograph then shows a location looking down on top of the existing building, which is identified with the yellow star. I'm sure members know it well, the car parking area then to the front. Our site then is out to the rear of the building and also includes an area to the left-hand side. I'll come on to those in a second. You will note then the location of the houses nearby, as there is residential properties on 3 sides of the existing building. So the proposal then, this is a block plan. It's at a large scale, members, so I'll zoom in a second on it. But you can see the block plan shows the location of the building, the existing shop. This is the yellow star, and then the extension coming out the rear. So as I say, it's at a large scale, so I'll just zoom in to allow a more detailed analysis of it. So the shop then with the yellow star, the extension then is out the back, and it gives you an idea of the size and scale of it in relation to the existing building. You then have a yard area out the rear and a new access out. So the extension, I'll come on to those in a second. The extension then, the existing front elevation won't change, and that's the top slide. The bottom one then is the rear elevation, so the extension will come out the back. So there is an extension to it, and that's the area to the right-hand side of that rear elevation. So blue is existing, and the sort of the white area is a proposal. Again, the side extensions then show the extension coming out from the rear of the property. So the top slide is one side, and you can see the extension going out to the right-hand side. And then from the other side, you can see the extension then coming out from the rear of the existing building. There's a floor plan then, looking down again, you can see the black sort of outline is the existing building.
And the red then to the left-hand side is the proposed new floor space with the canteen and the toilets then at the bottom. So if you just zoom in on the proposed extension, you can see on the slide then it's a central area for packing. And then the left-hand side is a bakery area, a dispatch area in the top left, and then you have the stores shown on the screen. So it is linked through the existing premises and is part of it and will function ancillary to the existing premises. And I'm sure the agent will go into that in more detail when they get a chance to speak. So just back to the block plan then, members, just to look at detail of what's proposed then. To the extension then is in blue. And if you look to the left of it, you can see there's markings there for car parking and various other things, HGV1, HGV2. So I'll just take you through the details of what's proposed in there. So you have a new access then coming in off the road as identified by the blue arrow. You can see it coming in then off the public road into the area. There's a wall then along the red line. It's annotated as wall detail B. And you have a wall on the top left and on the bottom right of the slide. And those are two new walls that will be erected. And they're screen walls, which will be built along the boundaries of the neighbouring property and will reduce the impact from noise. It will also screen the site so you won't be able to see into it from the existing properties. There are 3 trees along the edge of the road. 2 of those are to remain. That's the 2 identified by the green circles. And you can see one's at the bottom right-hand side of the site, and the other one then is up near the entrance. There is one to go though. That's the one identified by the red circle. And the reason it's going is because the new access is being created, and really the long-term survival of that tree would be questioned. The branches, etc., overhang the road. But also the turning area for the lorries to come in would be on top of the existing tree roots, etc. So a decision was made whether or not we could allow for that tree to be removed. And you'll note within the report that the view is that it can be removed, and the removal of it will actually be in the interests of sustaining the adjacent tree beside it and allow for its long-term survival. There is a tree report accompanying the application, and it does go into detail on the 3 trees. And these are the photographs taken from the report. So you can see on the left, photograph 1 is looking at the 2 trees that are together, and then the 3rd tree is over on the left-hand side. And you can see the right-hand tree in photograph 1, the right-hand tree, that's the lime tree, so that's the one that will go, and that will allow the tree beside it then to have more space and allow it to survive and flourish. Photograph 2 then shows the 2 trees overhanging the road. See then the branches do go over the edge of the road and also over the footpath. And then photograph 3 is from inside the site, and you can see then the basis of trees 9 and 10, and then also the curbing and hard surfacing area that are around those trees at the moment. And the report does note that the trees have a very limited area for at the base of their roots, and the proposal then is to increase that and create a larger area of green space around the base of the trees and allow for their long-term survival. And finally then, the photograph 4 from the report shows the base of the tree in the corner, and you can see how difficult it is for that tree at the moment with the utility box and then the brick pillar and also the fencing then adjacent to it, so it is under pressure. So the proposal then is to remove 1 tree and create a grassed area along the front, which will allow the tree roots then to develop and spread within that area. That will also allow for an attractive sort of green space along the edge of the road and utilise the trees and take advantage of the visual amenity that they do provide to the area. So you can see in the left-hand slide, the green area is outlined with the green line, the green boundary, and then the right-hand slide really is just a fill in the green spaces. So that's the area of green space that you will have along the edge of the road now, beside the car park. And then along the edge of the road, you'll have a new fence, which is a black ornamental metal fencing, which again, you'll be able to see through that and see the green space and take advantage of the trees and the impact they have upon the streetscape. These are Google photographs, members, really just showing the trees in full bloom, taken during the summer, obviously. So that's the approach then, looking up towards the site. And you can see the trees then and the impact they have on the area. That's just moving closer. You can see the chestnut tree closest to you. From the opposite direction then, looking back towards the site, you can see the tree closest to us is the lime tree, and that's the one that's proposed to take down to allow the access to go in. And then you have the other trees beside them, which will be retained. And that's just a view then as you come closer to the site. So in terms then just of the details, the application has an access, as I say, coming in off the public road is a new access. There is an existing access into the old house that was there. It will be closed up and this new access created in the position, roughly in the position of the blue arrow. You do have a number of houses nearby, members, and the impact upon those properties is an important consideration. The nearest neighbours then really are directly abutting the site to the northwest, and they're identified by the red rectangle. So you can see the position of them right beside the site. So that's those properties. See then the access then into the site will be at the position of the red arrow. Just as we move closer then, you can see the side gable of those properties, and then their fence runs up, joins the large green fence, and that's where the new access then will go into the site. There is a brown wooden fence along the common boundary at the moment, and that will be replaced by a screen wall, which is shown on the slide as wall detail B. I have a slide there. So that's the new wall that will go along the boundary. It's 1.8 meters high to the top of the wall with the concrete pillars on top then. That's designed then to screen the site, and also will help assist reducing noise. So overall, members, you'll note from the report, the recommendation then is to approve planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to the 7 conditions.
Okay, members, we have speaking rights in respect to the application by Mr. Bennett, Dominic Bennett, the agent for the application, and after that we'll also, there's a statement being sent by way of representation by Councillor Stephen McCann in support of the objectors. So first of all, Mr. Bennett, you're very welcome to speak to the committee. We have 10 minutes allocated for your representation, and in your own time, you can go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to present this application. I think maybe Darren for the planning office there has covered a lot of the points within the application that has been submitted. The application was submitted in October 2020, which basically arose from the client's development of a business plan on how to provide an extension to the shop. Within the plan that he identified, there was a need due to the demand of customers for more space for storage to put food out into the shop and that. And the client also identified that it would be best practice to separate the staff from the customers by providing staff car parking to the rear of the commercial premises. Within the client's assessment, a health and safety issue arose regarding the movement of vehicles serving the shop. The client felt that providing access to the rear from the Demore Road was the best practice to operating his business safely. Also, COVID came into play when deciding factor, because it meant keeping the staff separate and the delivery personnel separate from the shoppers at the front of the shop, and also meant that all vehicles for staff was into the rear of the property, and meant that vehicular movement in the front of the shop was a lot safer. There's not really much else to sum up. Basically, that EHS and even the road service have been consulted a few times on it, and they had no objections to the entrance of the Dromore Road. I think maybe to sum it up or whatever, I feel that the planning committee should determine the application for approval, and I would like to thank you for listening to the points that I brought forward.
Okay, at this junction, I'd now asked committee members if they had any questions for the agent. Councillor McClary.
Thank you, Chair. obviously that Dromore Road's a more residential area rather than the main street of Fintona. What amount of deliveries and how many vehicles would be going in there daily? And what sort of times of the day are they going to be making deliveries? As that will obviously need to be considered and how it would impact the neighbouring properties.
With the Dromore Road aspect, the vehicles will still be on the road, and if they're going to be turning in through Ashfield Gardens to access the site anyway, or if they're coming off the main street, I think timing wise, it's going to be within the mornings and moving out in the evenings. Your staff is going to be coming in the mornings and moving out in the evenings as well from that access. The public's going to be coming off the main street within the town. So vehicular movement's going to be much the same. There's no significant increase in vehicular movement. Bar coming out of that access will be mainly the use of staff and delivery service. So I think it's not going to be an access that's going to be used for the shop as a whole for the public. It's only servicing the entrance for staff and for deliveries.
Okay, so sorry, just so it will only be for staff and delivery, so there'll be that potentially hard to control. Will that be enforced in any way, or how is that going to be facilitated? I'm just wondering.
So the client will be operating a key fob system or barrier there to stop any members of the public going through. So
Okay.
Majority of members of the public from Ashfield Gardens come through the car park anyway and out towards the main street. So the road service don't have an issue with access for public movement and for people within Ashfield Gardens within that area. They don't normally come out of Ashfield Gardens entrance. They actually, the people that's walking come down through the shop and out onto the main street where the toilet facility is.
Yeah.
And that's where the access. So there's plenty of pedestrian access. It's not where everybody's coming in and out of Ashfield Gardens access.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Councillor McElduff.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask Mr. Bennett, given that vehicular movements would increase on the heavily residential Dromore Road, what mitigating measures, maybe some have been mentioned already, but in total, what mitigating measures have been included in the application to ensure, no or less impact on that residential area?
Within the access for that, as I say, that the applicant themselves will be controlling it, that it's only going to be their own staff and their own vehicles for servicing to enter and to exit that entrance. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Obviously, my concern as somebody who knows the Dromore Road area in Fintona quite well, is that, you do have Mitchellburn Terrace, Duncan Park, Ashfield Gardens, the Mews. It is a heavily residential area, and this is a significant alteration to the character of that area. So I just want to be 100% sure that the applicant has taken significant measures to mitigate against any loss of amenity. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I have also Councillor Deehan.
Thank you, Chair. Well, Chair, I think Mr. Bennett may already have partially answered my question, but just to be clear, Chair, I wonder if Mr. Bennett would mind summarising the advantages that this new access would provide over the current access, just to summarise why that new access is thought desirable. Thank you.
Just to summarise, that access, first of all, within the assessment of the client, for particularly for the pandemic that we're in at the moment, is to separate his staff and his deliveries from people at front of shop. That was one of the reasons. And also the safety within the car park, to not have any vehicles coming in and out through an already area that's served by public wanting to use the shop. So it's for the applicant's point of view and for ourselves, we feel that there's more safety taking the access in and out through the proposed access that's on plan at the moment. There's more gains that you're taking off heavy vehicles or any delivery vehicles off the main street, which is more population and more public walking about it. So it's from a safety aspect, this is the reason why the entrance is proposed as shown on the plans.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members, any further questions for the agent? Just checking, is there any from remote access? Because I can't see sight of the. Sorry, nobody's indicating. Okay, in that case, I want to thank Mr. Bennett for his representation and for answering the questions of the committee. And I'm going to move on now to representation by councillors. And we have one representation being made by Councillor Stephen McCann, and this is in support of the objectors. And I'll read that out for the benefit of the committee now. Firstly, can I say that I am submitting this statement in my capacity as an elected representative who has received many calls and letters from the residents of Fintona who have significant concerns in relation to this application. It is my duty to articulate their concerns on their behalf, whilst mindful that a local business is hoping to develop and extend their property. The objectors here have legitimate concerns which have not yet been addressed. If this proposal was to proceed, there would be an increased HGV and commercial traffic on the Dromore Road area of Fintona, a densely populated area of the town with high pedestrian footfall. This area is not compatible with large goods vehicles manoeuvring in close proximity to parked cars. There is concerns about the level of noise these extra vehicles will have on the residents, not to mention the increased risk of accident. The removal of a large lime tree is also controversial. This tree is protected by a tree preservation order. Indeed, the long-term sustainability of other trees is being brought into question should this development be permitted. I don't believe this has been afforded due consideration when reaching a recommendation here. Whilst I support any enterprise in their efforts to expand, it should not be expansion at any cost. This proposal, if approved, will have a real negative impact on the residents of Dromore Road, and I hope that you, the final decision makers, will take this into consideration when reaching your decision. That's a written representation by Councillor McCann. Members, I'm now going to invite the officers if they have any comment to make at this stage. It's Darren.
Councillor, just to confirm that during the course of considering the application, planning officers did consult with Environmental Health and DFI Roads, who obviously would be two important consultees. The objections then that come in were also sent over to those consultees, and they have had sight of them. Both consultees have come back that they are content with the proposal and have raised no objections, subject to standard conditions which are included within the report. In terms just there of the means of access, during the discussion there was a comment about controlling the access to the site. At the moment there isn't any condition or anything in relation to that on the application, and it would be an open access at the moment, and it would be something the applicant would be volunteering to provide. So just to bear that in mind, members, if it is approved at the moment, we don't have any condition on controlling that.
Thank you, Darren. Councillor Deehan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Darren, for your report. Could I just clarify with Darren, just on listening to his presentation, to his report, Chair, I had the impression, and I just wanted him to clarify this, I had the impression that the tree, the lime tree that is to be removed, should this new access go ahead, that it is already under pressure because of the adjacent trees and the fence and the brick pillar in close proximity to it. However, on looking at the photographs, the tree in question actually does seem to be quite healthy, and it is a rather beautiful tree. And I suppose we would have concerns regarding the removal of trees, but I just wanted to again get clarification that this particular tree is deemed to be under pressure in terms of its growth and sustainability in its present location. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, no problem. I'll just take you back to the photographs really, and I'll go through those from the start. So you have, so this is a slide then. You can see the 3 trees are along the edge of the road. The 2 green circles along the edge of the road are the 2 trees that are to be retained, and then you have the red circle, which is the lime tree, which is proposed to be removed as part of the application. The application is accompanied by a report from a tree surgeon, and he identifies 3 trees. So you have a horse chestnut, you have a beech, and a lime. The 3 trees, condition of them are put down as fair, so they're in fair condition, and they're of a medium age. When you go into look at the comments on each of the 3 trees, it does state that they are in fair condition, as I say. However, they are under pressure because of the proximity to the footpath. So you can see, the footpath is right beside the tree roots, and then you do have the other equipment. And on the inside, there's very little space then, soil, beside the tree roots, for the tree roots to live and be healthy. You then have a large area of hard standing right beside it from the old house. If you look at the proposal then, the green space then is the new green area, which will be put around the base of the trees, which will allow for a greater area for them to thrive and mature in. In terms of their removal, as I say, they're all down as a fair condition, and you can see that from the slides, the photographs. So this is the approach looking up towards them. This is the chestnut tree closest to you. And you can see, certainly not an expert, but it looks in reasonable health, and that is supported by the information in the report from the expert. So they are in fair condition is the reply to the question, but they are under pressure. And that's because of the proximity to the road, the footpath, and then on the inside, you have the limited space beside them. So from this direction, the tree closest to you is the one that is proposed to be removed, and that's a lime tree. That's the one then directly in front of you. Immediately beside it then is the beech tree. And again, it is down as being in fair condition. It says the tree is very large for this location. The road and pavement outside the site, difference in ground levels, and hard surfacing inside the site will restrict the development of the root system, the beech tree. So the removal of the lime tree will then allow more space for the beech tree to survive. That extra space on the inside as well will allow for the root system to develop and improve and allow for the long-term retention of the 2 trees.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Irving.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Look, I've listened to the report given by Darren, and listened to the agent, listened to the objections, but I think the case has been made for approval, so I'm happy to propose approval. But taking into account the objections and that Darren has mentioned that there's only a voluntary suggestion coming from the agent for the applicant of restrictive hours, I'm suggesting we add another condition, and the condition should be that deliveries Monday to Friday should be between the hours of 8 AM and 6 PM, on Saturday between the hours of 8 AM and 1 PM, and no deliveries on a Sunday. And that basically is to take into account the issue raised by the objectors and through Councillor McCann with regard to a residential area and the additional traffic that may be generated. So I'm happy to propose if those conditions could be included. Thank you.
Can I second that, Chair?
Councillor Rainey,
Mr. Garda's first.
I didn't see your hand,
Yeah.
Councillor Rainey, so I will take Councillor Gardy first in this instance. And
I'm sorry about that. My hand's not working.
I'll let you in a second, Councillor Rainey. Thank you, Chair. No, just 2 points of clarity.
There you are.
I was wondering, Darren, could we put in an extra condition, because Mr. Bennett did mention the access and that was a concern for residents, and Robert has put that in. I think that would be a sensible addition to the report. However, I just wondered about the objections. It said here, and pardon my ignorance, 17 representations have been received, include a number of anonymous. Does that include anonymous, or is they additional? That's everything. I'm just, what weight do we put on anonymous objections? Because I think that can be dangerous. You know, I can understand objections and where they're merited, but in the larger schemes of all applications, I'm asking, anonymous objections I would be very wary of, because they could be from anywhere. So just maybe clarity on that. Thanks, Darren.
Yeah, so in terms of the objections, whenever an application is re-advertised or re-neighbour notified, the same people sometimes object again. So that number could be a duplication, you know, of objections. So the critical thing for me is not necessarily the number, it's what they're saying. And when you look through the objection and the content of that, the issues they're raising, those are the key things from us, whether that's from immediate neighbours or somebody miles away. It's the key issues that are important. And we look at those. In terms directly of anonymous objections, they're obviously given weight, but whenever you have a neighbour who puts their name to it, you can go to that property and see exactly what they're talking about. When it's anonymous, you're sort of trying to read into the objection almost and take out what you can from it. So whenever there's a named occupant, then yes, that is given appropriate weight.
At this point, I'm going to Councillor Rainey. Go ahead, Councillor Rainey. I can see you.
Chair, I have followed the presentation by Darren and Mr. Bennett, and I'm happy with both of them, and certainly I'm happy to second the proposal made by Councillor Irvine.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rainey. Councillor Feely.
Thank you, Chair. I know it's been second proposed now, but I just want to make one comment and maybe ask a question. I'd have no problems at all with the trees there, what Robert was saying there, asking earlier on. For in years to come, that tree would become unsafe. I know myself, any trees beside a footpath where the roots isn't getting enough water and stuff. So that I think that's a good solution to take that tree out of it altogether. The other two trees will have a better chance now with the more green area and stuff too. But I'm just coming in up on about the noise, about this on Councillor McCann's letter there about the noise pollution I see here as well. And I take that's probably coming from them people living beside it in them houses there. And I see there's going to be a wall put up there. Well, it might be down there, but I didn't see it. Is that wall going to be built, or is it going to be shuttered? For houses, I know that things gone past there, bypasses and stuff there, where they're trying to keep noise down at houses. Do you still use timber or kind of like timber panels, you know, which used to keep the noise down more maybe? I was just wondering, was any of that looked into, or what way were they going to do that wall that was going to be shuttered, or could they use any timber maybe might keep the noise down a wee bit more?
Yes, so the proposal is to put a wall up, and condition 5 within the paper says that the wall has to be put in before they're allowed to operate within that site. So you're not allowed to create any noise until they put the wall up. The details of the wall then, that's the elevation that we have of it. From my reading and looking at it, it doesn't look like a shuttered wall, it just looks like a standard block wall. And would be something that would be commonly put up at these types of sites. Certainly we can ask for that final details of that to be submitted to the council for agreement. But I'd be expecting this to be a concrete block wall of solid construction rather than a fence. A wooden fence needs maintained, looked after, and when it starts to rot, then it has to be replaced, etc. The concrete wall would be a more permanent fixture, so it would be welcomed and preferred over a fence.
Councillor Maguire.
I'm going to get to Carly. Just a few questions. First question would be, how many delivery vehicles are attending the shop as it exists at the minute? And I presume they access from the main Vintner Street. Again, from the photographs, I would have concerns about HGV vehicles going up through that residential road that was indicated on the photographs. I'm not very familiar with the area, but I'm just considering there's obviously vehicles going into the shop as it is at the minute. And from the drawings that I saw there, I would have thought that there's still possibly vehicular access from the main street as it exists. Do we anticipate a multiple of deliveries now, or would the deliveries be the same, only that the lorry will have more stuff on it? That's my question in relation to, is it necessary to open the other entrance to the rear? That's the first point. And I had another consideration, but it's gone clean out of my head, so I'll leave it at that. Darren, if you could just give me the indication, what's anticipated the increase of vehicles, and is it necessary that the rear access has to be open even with the expansion? That's my general sticking point. Thanks.
So in terms of the increases, the application form does give details on the increase in goods vehicles, and that will currently is 5, and will go up by 2, so it'll be 7 goods vehicles on the application form. There is currently access through from the front of the site down the side of the building. That is will be still available. However, you heard from the agent, saying that the idea is to take the vehicles, the larger vehicles, away from the main street and having to go down through the existing public car park, that they would have this separate entrance for a variety of reasons. One of them is health and safety, which you can understand. So the answer then is an extra 2 vehicles, according to the P1 form.
Thanks for that, Darren. And just on the tail end of that then, so really then we're considering a complete new access to the rear, going through quite a narrow residential area, and given 17 objections, I would have concerns. I think that a +2 entering from the front of the access that exists already would be easier to facilitate, in my opinion, than to create this problem that we have created by giving the access to the rear. And I think on that grounds, I wouldn't be fully supportive of the application as it sits.
Councillor McElduff.
Chair, again, I think my concerns and sentiments are reflected by Councillor Maguire's line of question. And, my concern would be, it's about the HGV vehicles on the Dromore Road. And the increase in traffic movements there does make me feel uncomfortable, because I know that community, I know its physical layout. I was always very conscious, even when in Ashfield Gardens, that the separation distance from, on a second point, the separation distance from the actual shop to the houses was small, and now it's going to be reduced still further. So I was just writing down my concerns would be HGV vehicles, increase in traffic movements, the separation distance from the closest home being further reduced. And I was interested in that point that Councillor Garrity made about the controlled access, that had been suggested by Mr. Bennett earlier, I think Councillor Feely addressed the tree issue well, as did Darren, of course. So my concerns are in and around an increase in HGV vehicle movements in the Dromore Road, which is very, I know that area so well, because you've Duncan Park on both sides of the road, you've Mitchell Burn Terrace on the left-hand side going out, you've Ashfield Gardens, about 100 houses, you have the Mews, there's probably about 200 plus, I would suggest, residential houses in that area, as well as the Dromore Road and Recrean Court. And so it's that would be my concern about the HGV vehicle movements and the separation distance from closest homes, if Darren might have anything to say on those points.
No, Councillor Dumas, I'd say it's your view in these applications. The only thing I would ask is the comments about the increase in vehicle traffic on the road are obviously out in the forum. Are members the same views in relation to the vehicles inside the site? because the yard is increasing. So the new extension, you can see on the slide there. So the area then to the left, you can see the HGV parking areas and the car parking areas. So that will change the use of that site from what was a dwelling now to a yard with the vehicles inside. So I don't know whether the member wants to comment on that, or is it purely the impact of the traffic on the road that is important?
Obviously, both are important. Both are definitely important. Just my level of consciousness about the residential nature of the Dromore Road is paramount in my thinking at this time. Thank you, Chair.
Further reference, I suppose, to the control. Can I just clarify for my own benefit? In terms of the control of access to staff and deliveries, are we totally reliant on the applicant kind of volunteering that? Can we condition that?
Yeah, you could put a condition on. Yeah, it'd be reasonable to put that on, that a key fob system is agreed with the council and should be operated for the lifetime of the permission. No problem with that.
Okay, thank you, Darren. Mr. Garrity.
Thanks for letting me in again, Chair. I suppose, Darren, genuine concerns here being raised in the chamber on this application, especially as Councillor McAuliffe alluded to in the Dromore Road. Would it be fair to say, Darren, that a lot of that HGV activity on that road would be coming that road anyway, only it's going to be now turning up to the left, I assume, rather than going on down to the junction there and taking a left up past the Butchers, Mo's, etc., and taking a left in? Because the HGVs aren't just going to appear there, they've had to come from somewhere. And it would be fair to say that most of them would be coming that route anyway, just cutting up left prior to the next left.
I don't know where they come from. I don't have their route coming to the site. We do know that currently they go up the main street and turn in, as you can see on the slide there, they turn in the existing car park. And that's how they're servicing the site at the moment.
Well, I suppose, Chair, that would indicate that they are on that route already, as opposed to coming down the street and turning in right. I suppose my point I'm trying to make is that those vehicles are there anyway, and just something, it is a concern obviously for residents that'll be cutting up at the side of their houses, but just to be clear that it looks, from what I'm hearing from the report, those vehicles are on that road, only they're travelling a little further before they turn left. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Chair. And rightly so, it has been quite a long debate on this application, and very important issues have been raised within. I'm inclined to agree with the proposal of Councillor Irvine, seconded by Councillor Alan Rainey, that we go for an approval. However, some things have been mentioned here, and I think we have 7 conditions mentioned on the report. There was an 8th condition, I think it was proposed by Councillor Irvine. There was another issue there with regard to the wall that Councillor Feely had referred to. Can we make a condition within that, and I'm directing my comments to Darren, that we specify that is a properly built wall? If you could answer that for me first.
It'd be very difficult to specify it must be a properly built wall, to use those common phrases, common terms. I think it'd be more appropriate if we ask for details of what the walls be constructed out of. And if we get that in, I can liaise with environmental health to see what impact that'll have in terms of reducing noise and screening the site as well. So we could certainly do that. As I say, I would be expecting this wall to be built out of concrete blocks, probably 2 on their sides, for example, or laid flat. We can get details of that all in and agree that with the applicant. I don't think that's going to be a problem. And then require the wall to be built in accordance with that. So that's fine.
Yeah, I'd be happy with that, and thanks for that clarification there. I suppose Councillor Garrity had mentioned the HGVs that would be on the road. I am also away with that area, the road between Fintona and Dromore, and there would be quite a number of vehicles on that road. And HGVs would be part of it as well. So I don't think we're going to have much of an increase on that road with regard to the main road. I do honestly know what the concerns of the residents are, but I think with their conditions and the other things that have been covered here today, I'm happy to support Councillor Irvine's proposal as seconded by Councillor Alan Rainey. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Irvine.
Thanks very much. The issue with regard to traffic up and down the Dromore Road is exercising committee, and obviously right, because it's been highlighted in that. And I think DFI Roads have come back and said they have no issue actually with the access. So they would have looked at traffic generation, they would have looked at the location and everything like that. And in their opinion, if things can go along there, they can. The issue with the wall, I think it's not necessarily just the type of materials, which you're right, Darren, it needs to be, but it's how effective it's going to be as a sound barrier, because I think that's the issue that Councillor Feely is probably doing. Maybe you would need to get it checked out when you're talking about the materials, but also the deflection quality, the height of it, because I think it's only, is it 1.6 or 1.8?
0.8 meters.
You may need to go up to 2.4 or something like that, just to actually take into account the issue of HGV traffic going in and the noise. I'm not sure whether you can do that at this stage, but I'm happy that is delegated to officers to actually deal and agree with. My proposal still stands. Thank you.
Just on that, members, just to remind you that the planning department has consulted with environmental health, who have seen these plans and are content with it. The wall is 1.8 meters, and that's what the neighbours are anticipating. If there is approval, that will be 1.8. If we were to increase that, we wouldn't be able to do that currently because we need to neighbour notify them. So if you are making a decision today, it's based on a 1.8 metre high wall, or else it's adjourned, deferred, whatever, to seek amendments.
Okay, members, any further questions at this stage? Okay, so we have a proposal to approve the application that was proposed by, supported the recommendation to approve by Councillor Irvine, and that was seconded by Councillor Rainey. Are members all in agreement? No, we're not in agreement. Well, in that case, I'd ask for a show of hands in support of the recommendation by Councillor Irvine. And members in support of the application are Councillor Rainey, I have Wexels, and Councillor Robinson, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Feely, Councillor Deehan, Councillor Irvine, Councillor Coyle, Councillor McClahary, Councillor Garrity, myself, Councillor Campbell. Those against the application, a show of hands. And those members against the application, the recommendation are Councillor McElduff and Councillor Maguire. Members?
Just to sum up, then, the recommendation of 4 members was to approve planning permission for the reasons listed within the report, subject to conditions. Members have granted planning permission subject to those conditions. There was also discussion then about 3 additional conditions. If I could ask the final wording of these to be delegated back to officers just to tighten them up, but it will be along the lines. The first one is to restrict the hours of delivery, Monday to Friday 8 to 6, Saturday 8 to 1, and no deliveries on a Sunday. Members contend it's just to restrict the hours of delivery. As I say, the yard will be used by vehicles and there is another access into the yard. So I don't know whether members want to just restrict the access off the road into the yard or want to restrict the actual use of the yard itself. That's so.
Councillor Thompson.
I wasn't going to get into that one, but I was happy. Darren has listed a few of them there, but I was happy enough to propose the conditions as you have outlined, Darren, and to be dealt with by the officers concerned.
Okay. So just to restrict the hours then on that one. The second one then is to get details of the means of controlling the access and to be submitted to the council and agreed, and that will be carried out for the lifetime of the permission. And then also then details, final details of the construction of the wall, cross section, etc., showing how it will be actually constructed and what the details are.
Councillor Irvine.
Yeah, I'm happy to propose those 2 additional conditions as outlined by Darren. Yeah.
Councillor Feely.
Chair, I'll be brief. And sorry, Darren, for this bit going on about this wall. It's kind of sound like a broken record, but I know the height and it'd be built with blocks and all that. But I was just thinking, I'd see them on the bypass to be wooden panels, or if maybe could look into maybe putting a panel up against the wall or something like that. No, you know, it keeps the sound down more than the actual blocks are shutting. You know, and maybe that's not possible. It's just a thought. You know.
Say, Councillor, it's a full application and the proposal has been notified and neighbours have been consulted. So if you were changing that to something else, I'd be concerned then that you would need to re-neighbour notify and let people see that again. It would be maybe going outside of the current application. As I say, for me, the comfort I have, if you want to look at that wall, is that Environmental Health have looked at that and are content that it will serve its purpose as it stands, and no further height increase or changes to it is necessary. So take some comfort from that.
Okay, members. Moving on now to application 2, LA 10 2020 0618 and just prior to this, to Darren introducing the application, I want to just say a few words. I am aware of an issue which occurred, as we all are, at our planning committee meeting on the 22nd of September 2020 in relation to the process to consider this matter in confidential business. And I want to advise that whilst this incident was regrettable, it had no bearing on the planning issues before us and is not relevant to the committee's consideration today of the planning application. However, as chair of the planning committee, I do want to extend an apology to Mr. McFadden in relation to that occurrence. Our officers have responded to Mr. McFadden's concerns in relation to the matter, and there is a mechanism available to the applicant should he wish to raise further concerns. So just wanted at the outset to issue that apology and to note that update.
Members, so paper B then, appendix 2, application 2 is LA 10 2020 0618. It's an outline application for a dwelling on a farm for Mr. D. McFadden, and the recommendation then is to refuse planning permission. The reasons listed within the report and subject to one reason. I'll just take you through the details on the screen then is the
Oh, sorry, members, we need to go in for this application, go into confidential business. A proposer, Councillor Maguire, and seconded Councillor Feely. lobbying. Councillor Feely, did you want to comment? Yep, proposed, sorry, yes, Councillor Robinson. Okay, we're out of 29. Back live again. Okay, so application 3 then. Sorry, we'll provide an update just first.
Chair, so during confidential business, members considered application LA 10 0618 for dwelling on a farm, and it was unanimously agreed to accept the officer's recommendation to refuse.
Okay, members, Councillor Maguire.
And again, not wishing to break the meeting, but we have sat for nearly 2 hours again. Could I propose a comfort break? 5 minutes, please.
Seconded by Councillor Irvine. And just before that, we need a proposer and seconder for the report. Councillor Coyle, Councillor Deegan. Take a okay, and a seconder for Councillor Garrity for Councillor Maguire. application 6, item 6, application 3, and that's the single-story farm dwelling. We do have speaking rights and representation in requested, so we'll come to that at the appropriate time. Thank those that waited to this point. I know that they were in the lobby for quite a while in the last application, so we will come to the speaking rights shortly. I'll ask Darren to introduce the application now.
Yeah, members, so application 3 then, LA 10 2021 0684. It's a full application for Mr. McGarty on the Lack Road in Irvinstown, and it's for a single-story farm dwelling. And the recommendation is to refuse planning permission for the reasons listed within the report, and subject to 3 reasons. Just take members through the details then on the screen. You can see on the left-hand side. Excuse me. On the left-hand side is the application site outlined in red, and you can see it comes off the road then down the existing laneway to the location of the site, which is annotated on the drawing. The blue line then is the other land within the farm, and that's shown to reflect the farm maps then, which are on the right-hand side of the slide, and show the fields within the farm. You'll obviously note there I have added in the distance between the existing farm dwelling and the site is 126 meters. That's one of the issues before members today, that the site is not visually linked or clustered with a group of buildings on the farm. Block plan then shows the location of the house just set in off the existing farm laneway, the driveway coming in then, and the proposed house then with the garden area surrounding it. Floor plan then of the house shows a 4-bedroom house with a kitchen dining area in the middle. And the elevations then, as I say, it's a full application, so the elevations and drawings are fully included. And that's sort of the view you would see onto the laneway. So it's a well-designed house, modern interpretation really of a traditional vernacular design, as we would say. In terms then of the location of the site and the reasons for refusal, there are 3 reasons. But the key policy issue is the site is not visually linked or sited to cluster with an established group of buildings on the farm. So I've identified there on the plan, you can see the site's the yellow star and the nearby buildings then. So the farmhouse then is about 120 meters up the laneway. And then there's a farm group then to the rear of that, it's about 170 meters. And then there's also a farm group further on up the laneway, around 90 meters. So the site itself is not visually linked or sited to cluster with those. And there would be sites down around those existing farm groups down near the farmhouse especially, where you could visually integrate a house and it would be clustered with the farm buildings. So that's the location of the farmhouse, and then you can see the farm buildings in at the rear. So there are sites around those buildings that would meet the policy tests, and therefore there wouldn't really be an allowance for an exception or an off-site location. However, it is noted that it is an active working farm, and there are animals and there's immediate issues with the farm group. So a reasonable separation distance would have to be provided to allow the new house to be sited away from that farm. But there are alternative sites then beside the farmhouse, and now that the planning advice note is gone, that's not an issue. So it would be sited beside the farmhouse and away from the farm group. So that's really in relation to reason for refusal 1, and that the building's not an exception. There's sites available at the group of buildings on the farm. Reason 2 then is the CTY1, which is the catch-all, if you want to use that expression, reason. If it meets CTY10, reason 2 would fall. In terms of reason 3, the applicant has advised that they now have control of the land required to provide safe access. But as it stands, the application does not include those. And therefore that reason would be sustained at the moment. So the recommendation then is to refuse permission for the reasons listed within the report, subject to those 3 reasons.
Okay, members, we have speaking rights in relation to this application, and I want to welcome the applicant. On behalf of the applicant, Mr. Morris Keane, the agent, and also on behalf of the applicant, Ms. Una McGarty. You're both very welcome. We are also going to get representation from councillors after this. So I welcome you both. We have 10 minutes for this part of the meeting, and I will sort of let you know if you're approaching that 10-minute mark, but in your own time, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, committee, for allowing us this opportunity to present our case in respect of this application. You might well at the outset wonder why we have come in with a full application on this site rather than, so to speak, test the waters with an outline. And the reason is very simple. We have determined, both the applicant and myself, that this really, in terms of the working efficiency of the farm, of the small holding, is the only site that suits our purposes. There are, as I would say, there are reasons both compelling and we believe also material as to why we should be allowed to develop this site in particular. The compelling reasons have to do with the economic performance and the efficiency generally of the farm, and Ms. McGarity, on behalf of the applicant, her father, will speak on these a little later on or expand on these. I would like to discuss basically the position that the planners have taken on this, and notwithstanding the difficult job they have to do, these policies exist for no small reason, and they're not to be overturned so easily. But what I would like to say is that basically the site as chosen by us is a viable alternative. Because let's examine exactly why the policy exists, and don't forget that it's a policy as such. It can be interpreted, it's open to debate. The planner's position is obviously that they have to test it, and is only right. And the position that Darren and his colleagues have taken is the moment that this does not meet the test. However, we would submit that in terms of visual impact, that is why the policy exists. And then the policy then uses the clustering to, as they would say, to minimize or diminish the visual impact. Simply speaking, the site, as submitted by us, has actually got no visual impact whatsoever. The only critical view is from the Drumharvey Road, and it is acknowledged by all that the site is not visible from the Drumharvey Road. There are no other critical views unless you are 5 miles away looking from the other direction. So we would just simply submit that the desire implicit in the policy is to minimize visual impact. So that the policy, I don't wish to say that it becomes academic, but the policy exists not for the sake of clustering per se, but to minimize the impact. So what we're saying is that basically the impact, the visual impact doesn't exist where we're putting the house. So what we're saying that this in conjunction with the compelling reasons form a very reasonable position for us to be taken, and this is where we would ask the committee to adjudicate. So yes.
We still have some time if Ms. McGarity wishes to make any representation.
Yes, so just to put a little bit of what we did. So myself and my father sat down and discussed at length, obviously, where suited the farm, and with the view to, in the future, to help on the farm, learn, and then take on the farm to make sure it lasts for as long as we're alive as well. So a few of the issues or the points that we discussed was we wanted the least impact on the farm. So we looked at the number of hectares on the farm and broke it down to grazing versus silo. And with the increase in the unpredictable seasons, we decided not to take from silo fields. And as we have less silo fields than grazing fields, we then have well-established hedgerows that are very mature on the farm. And with this, we decided to do a little bit of research online, and we looked on Infrastructure NI under Building on Tradition, a Sustainable Design Guide for NI Countryside. Under settlement patterns, there was just 2 articles that I'd just like to say that we thought were relevant. So it was field enclosures had one of the most significant visual impacts on the rural landscape. This extends to the richer lowlands farming areas to predominantly open field areas to the north and west, creating 2 distinguishable field patterns: large regular enclosures, and in the lowlands narrow upland areas. There was also another one, which was legacy of these measures give landscape the attractive parkland qualities it maintains today. There is an increasing awareness of ecological significance of natural field boundaries by virtue of their linear and continuous structure, of the character of which is most important to wildlife. After reading those, we believed that we would try and not remove any hedgerows, as they are well established and mature. And the last one is then, I know it's not material, we're really aware of this, but to be able to financially afford to build a house, we would need a mortgage. So prior to even talking to Morris, we have spoke to some banks to see where would be viable, and we have had some verbal contact to say this is the only site that would be considered on the farm. And then the last one is just health and safety of having a young family next to the farm. We've all heard of in the last few years, of tragic accidents or whatever. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it would just be a worry of ourselves.
Okay. Thank you for your representations. Well, within the time limit there, we do have an opportunity now for members of the committee maybe to ask the agent or the applicant any queries. Councillor Garrity.
Thank you, Chair, and thank the speakers there, in particular Ms. McGarrity, which I want to clarify. I'm sure she hates being called Garrity without the Mac, and I hate being called Garrity with the Mac, so we're not related in any way. But so, Ms. McGarrity, you clearly have done some research and you've give us your take on why you like this preferred site, and I appreciate that. But the question I'm going to ask to whether Mr. Keane or Shav, which hasn't been addressed in their presentation, and I just think it's touched on by Darren, but it'll be item 3, which concerns me greatly within the report, and maybe what the situation is now, if they could clarify for the safety and access and good visibility, which will be required, because whether there's a house on that plot or indeed another plot within the holding, that would be important for us to make sure that people going in and out of it would be safe. This wouldn't be something I'd be comfortable with, but Darren did make reference to it, so maybe they could clarify where the situation is with that, Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah, so we I've went to our neighbour, which is actually Drumduff Cottage, which is to the right of the entrance to the existing laneway, and have got signed agreement with them that we can make the access safer, whatever is deemed safe. If that means removal of hedge or whatever, they have said that they have our support to do so, and it's signed by them. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. That was it. Councillor McElduff.
Can I ask Una, whom I don't know personally, but can I ask Una if to elaborate on that point about mortgage difficulties? How does that come into play with in relation to planning applications, and in your case, mortgage issue?
Survival of the farm. Yes. So just because we had been speaking to some other people that had built houses, whatever, and we knew that shared lanes and proximity to farm had come up as issues, we decided to just have a wee chat with some lenders to see how that would affect us and if it does affect us. So as I know, I know that it's not directly like a plan, and it's just something we discussed, and that with it being any closer to farm buildings, they deem it as an unacceptable site for a mortgage.
Okay, and I assume they didn't stipulate any distance in particular that would make it unacceptable. It was just that this was his. I mean,
All they said is they viewed that if they said it was any closer to farm buildings, it would be deemed a problem. It wouldn't be acceptable.
Thank you. Councillor Coyle.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the for the comments from the applicant and agent. I welcome that clarity has been given for number 3, the reason, and that is of utmost. The proposed dwelling is not visually linked, and in the presentation by the planner, it says that it is 90 metres from a farm. Could I ask Una about the sustainability of the farm and into the future? Was there any ideas of extending those buildings? I know that of safety concerns that you have raised about a young family. I don't know if you have any at the minute or not, but being extremely close to the farm is a health and safety issue, and it is it's of importance for you to pick the right site. And is 90 metres acceptable in your eyes to cluster?
So 90 metres is our neighbour's farm, and 90 metres, so you see where the end of the 90 metre arrow is, that's the boundary of our field, so they can't extend any closer to us. If I hope that answers.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
Could I just come back, Mr. Chairman? Is there?
Can do.
With the comment, yeah. We are aware, we have become aware, of course, that there was a dwelling on that exact spot within living memory, and we do appreciate that as that the planners don't give weight to this, which is a reasonable position to take in terms of the application. However, we just would ask the committee maybe to bear in mind the fact that we would just be reverting to a settlement pattern that was extant up until as late as 1968. Perhaps maybe you could give that consideration as well when you're determining. The other thing I would just like to add is that the planning service have acknowledged that the building as designed meets all the guidelines. It is acceptable in terms of rural design. So we'd just ask you to bear that in mind as well, that the planners have already acknowledged that.
Okay, members. Thank you. If there's any further questions before we move on to councillor representation.
Chair?
Yes, councillor.
Sorry, I thought my hand was up, but anyway, Councillor Rennie here. I was really intrigued about the discussion that Una and her dad had about the, in agriculture terms, practical farming, 2 different types of fields, silo fields and grazing fields. And I was anxious to know the silo fields, was it because of the topography, because they were flat and suitable to versus a grazing field, maybe that it would be a hilly, slopey, more dangerous, difficult to work on. And I thought that they had given a good deal of thought to that there, and it's a point well made and worth taking into consideration.
Okay, thank you, Councillor.
Maybe Una wanted to comment on that again.
No, well, yes, thank you, Councillor Rainey. It was of great consideration. Just as you say, suitability of the field. There, you know, we have a small farm, and the silo fields are very important, and they're efficient and it works well. So we don't want to tamper with that in any way. And as you will all well know, the silo fields then after the cut of silo can turn into grazing, you know, for the animals. So we decided to not take from silo fields just for efficiency and viability of the future of the farm.
We may all not know the point that you're making, but it's a very, very sensible one, and you're to be commended for that.
I was just going to say that some of us on the committee are more green than others in relation to farming, no pun intended. But Councillor Rainey got the sentiments expressed in a different way. Councillor Feely.
Thanks, Chair, and I'll be very brief. I'm not really going to ask a question, but I'll link him in there. Yeah, I want to commend Una as well for her comments there. What I was very impressed by Una there was where she thought of the environment and the hedges and around her farm, and that she wouldn't like to be ripping hedges out of it and drains and all that carry on. So I just want to commend her on that as well. Fair play to her.
Okay, members, we have many more indications. So at this point, we're going to move on to representation by councillors. I want to thank Mr. Kane and Miss McGarity for their representation. Councillors Diana Armstrong are seeking to make representation in support of the application, and also Councillor Stephen McCann has a written representation. Perhaps Councillor Armstrong, I could read that out, and then we could have we would know how much of the 5 minutes. You should have most of the 5 minutes, I should say, but it won't take me too long to read this out, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. That's okay with me. Thank you.
5 minutes for this part of the representation. Okay, so a statement in support of Mr. McGarity from Stephen McCann. And I know at this stage of the meeting, the technical policy details will have been all covered, so I do not plan to rehash them again. I believe that the concerns raised by our planning officials in relation to this application are not insurmountable. As a local councillor, I believe allowing people to build on their land should be supported as best we can. It could be contended that it is a fundamental right to live on your land when possible. Sustainable rural communities, schools, football clubs, businesses, etc., require people living in that area. We have seen the decline of rural communities in recent times, mainly due to young people moving away, which should be a concern to us all. I'm glad of this opportunity this month to weigh in behind the McGarity family today, and I hope they receive a positive outcome this afternoon. And that's from Councillor Steve McCann in support of the application. Councillor Armstrong, you have just under 4 minutes if you wish to go ahead. You may need to just unmute there. Just can't hear you at the moment, Councillor.
Sorry, Chair, apologies for that. No, I just wanted to preface it by saying I too am also a farmer's daughter, so I do understand the need for green fields and how precious our green environment is. Firstly, at the outset, just wanted to thank you, Chair, for permitting me to address the committee. And I do want to speak in support of the applicant, Mr. McGarity, in his appeal against the decision to refuse planning permission for the dwelling house. Firstly, I would respectfully ask members to consider why this site was chosen, this particular site, by the applicant, and to also consider it as an exception under the policy. The option of using either of the two sites mentioned has been considered, but these were not felt to be suitable as the first field, and we did see a photograph of the fields. There was one field that I visited and walked over. it's extremely poor ground, very wet and boggy. The second field is up by the other farm buildings, and citing that, and also citing that there would have its own implications, as Una has spelled out, starting a family living in close proximity to the buildings, which would pose its own hazards and dangers and health and safety. So really, both considerations have been taken into account. Using the field close to the farmhouse as a site would mean clearing mature trees, and these trees provide nesting and shelter to habitats, and their removal would also have implications for biodiversity, as well as increasing the visibility of the farm buildings on the Lack Road. And the site chosen, however, the map doesn't give the impression, the map does not show that it is actually up over a hill. The laneway goes up over the horizon and back down the other side. It is one-dimensional, the map, so it could be interpreted at a glance as being a flat, even laneway, and therefore the visual impact of a property at the proposed site over the horizon, at the proposed site, if the laneway was level, would indeed have a detrimental effect on the surrounding area, visual impact in the surrounding area. However, the site is located up over the hill, it's below the skyline on the other side and not at all visible from the road. The other site close by the farm buildings, as we've said, these have been considered, and Una has outlined the dangers and the threats of locating back at the other farm buildings. The site chosen does integrate sympathetically with the natural topography, and it has a well-defined mature hedging which will be retained. The dwelling house is, as I said before, below the skyline. It's single story, it's modest in design and not a prominent feature, and that has been referenced in the report. So therefore, to the committee members, in view of the representations given by the agent and applicant, I would ask members to approve the site for planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. And now I will ask our officer, ask Darren to make comment.
Members, really all the excuse me, all the issues raised, I think, have been included in the report and have been addressed in the report. But just to maybe provide clarity, so the site then is in the yellow star. Excuse me, the site's the yellow star, and the approximate position of the yellow star, and you can see the boundary hedge has been referred to the north of that, between the two fields. The critical view, the critical policy test, obviously, is that that site must visually link or cluster with an established group of buildings on the farm, similar to the previous application. And that's where the difficulties rise, in that the site is about 120 metres up the lane from the farmhouse, which is the blue star, and it's about 170 metres from the farm buildings, which is the red star. The green buildings, or the buildings with the green star beside it then at the bottom of the slide, are obviously owned by a third party. And therefore, they can't be taken into account because you can't visually link with somebody else's farm group. So it's the difficulty for the policy tests is the separation distance of 120 metres. And as has been referred to, when you're out at the site's actually up almost over the crest of the hill. So there's no real visual relationship between the two at all. There are sites down beside the farmhouse where a new dwelling could be sited and visually integrate and cluster with that farmhouse. There are also sites beside the farm buildings in red, but obviously, as I say, it's a working farm, so it would be unreasonable to put them right beside those, but you could get a site that has sufficient separation distance away from the farm group to visually link with that, and that has been demonstrated on plenty of other applications. So as it stands, the difficulty is the distance from the farm group and the lack of visual linkage. In terms, just finally, of the roads issues, you'll note from the slide on the right, the red line comes down the road and it sort of stops at the road edge. The applicant has said that they now have control of that. So if I could suggest that issue is set aside almost, because if the application is approved, it can be delegated back to officers to sort out the paperwork between ourselves, and we can do that. But if the refusal was going forward, it has to be on the basis of what's before you today, and that reason for refusal would be included as a reason for refusal.
Okay, members. Opportunity for any further advice from officers or Councillor Egan?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Darren, for your report and for the contributions from the agent and and Ms McGarrity. Chair, can I first get clarity? Is this in fact an outline planning application as indicated on the documentation, or is it in fact a full planning application?
Yes, the full application. So all the drawings, the block plan and the elevations, floor plan of the house are all there.
Okay, thank you. Secondly, in relation, I would appreciate Chair Darren's comments on the agent's assertion in terms of separation distance and whether a new dwelling will cluster with an established group of farm buildings. And I think Councillor Armstrong did make the point that, you know, to access this application site, you actually have to come up over the hill and down the other side, so that you know, the application site would not be readily viewed from the public road, and therefore will not impact adversely on the rural character of the area. And I think the point that the agent was making was that, you know, the purpose of the clustering with neighbouring buildings was really just to protect the amenity of the countryside, and that because this application site is well shielded from public view, that those points really are less relevant, or should not be relevant in terms of interpretation. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, again, quite similar to the previous application, you know, the policy tests are set out, and for an application to come to be approved, it must demonstrate it meets those policy tests. The policy criteria here under criteria C is that it must be visually linked or sited to cluster with the farm buildings. The fact that your site might be an excellent site and visually integrated and have trees and things around it isn't necessarily the policy test. The policy test is you have to visually link with the farm group, and that's the important thing before members today. It's not that the alternative can't be seen or the alternative is a well integrated site. That is not the test in the policy test. The SPPS is written that the development of the countryside must cluster and consolidate and group, and that's what the policy is looking everybody to do. Private laneways are a material consideration. The views from those are important and are taken into account. Maybe not as strongly as a public road, but certainly you know, this leads up to another farm group, so there, you know, there will be other people on this laneway. The fact that it visually integrates is not the policy test. That's what, you know, the difficulty today is. Why does this site not visually link or group with the farm buildings? That's the issue.
Councillor Maguire?
Similar to Josephine, I just noticed we didn't get a roadside view from, you know, the Google Maps that we normally get, Darren, which again refers to the point as made by Councillor Armstrong there about the topography of the area and how visually impactful this would be. So I just noticed we didn't have a roadside map, which may have assisted in that. But again, that's notwithstanding what advice you've already given, Darren, in relation to that. But the other question I had, you did say that in one of the arrows there, the red arrow, that you wouldn't expect them to build there, that there would be a reasonable distance. I just wonder, can you quantify the distance in meters, or does it relate case by case, Darren? Just
Yeah, certainly. In terms of the slides, Councillor, and I did look at putting up a photograph from the road, but it's of no value insofar as the site's, you know, not seen from it. So it actually really demonstrated that the site wasn't visually linked with the farm group. That is, in terms then of the sites beside the farm group, you know, the council has adopted a very you know, common sense approach to this, and I see it regularly with members that, you know, you would not put a new house beside a farm group that's an active working farm, and the main reason for that is health and safety reasons, amenity reasons, odors, smells, you know, nuisance, etc. So off-site locations, if you want to use those, have been permitted. The distance, really, each one's different. You know, I have seen them and they have been a significant distance because from the critical view, the farm is behind them and the house still is visually linked with the farm group. So it works. So each one's different. And I you know, can't sit here today and say 75 meters works, 100 meters works, 150, 200. It really depends on where you're looking at the sites from the critical views. Now in this case here, you know, anywhere immediately around that farm with a red star really is just, I don't think it'd be reasonable to expect anybody to go in there. So you're looking at the farmhouse, which obviously is a reasonable distance away because, you know, there's no immediate complaints there from the occupants or the applicants. But so you'll be looking at a site around the existing farmhouse in and around there, and that's where the applicant has put forward the argument that that's not suitable for the reasons they've given, and that's why they've gone for this alternative site further on up the lane.
And just to come back to clarify again, when you have the map up there, Darren, the green star, that is not within their farm, so that does not count. So a reduction of the distance towards that would not facilitate.
It's just to show you how far away it was from it. It's a third-party farm. Certainly, you know, that third-party farmer wouldn't want somebody building a house beside them, you know, for obvious reasons. But it's just to show you the distance from that farm. The critical buildings on this farm are the farmhouse at 120 meters and the farm buildings at 170 meters.
Feature.
Members, any further questions at this stage? So we have a recommendation then before us. Use the application if there's Councillor Garrity.
Thank you, Chair. And notwithstanding the recommendation, I've listened to the presentation by the people given and the report of Darren. And I'm led with hearing everyone, including very well-established farmers and their knowledge. I think that Ms. McGarty and her father and their position on the holding and their knowledge and expertise have had due diligence and had considered this to be the best site and, in their opinion, the only site suitable for their application. They meet all the requirements that we need for farming for years and one thing and another. And I have the one concern I had was the safety issue, and Darren said if this was to be approved, that would have to be referred back for clarity that those safety measures were met, in which case I would deem that essential and happy with that. But I believe when I listen to the agent and Ms. McGarty that this is the only site that's suitable in their opinion and with their examination of the holding. And I do have always concerns about having houses with maybe young couples or families starting up with children too near. And as someone who's not from a farming background, maybe that's maybe my ignorance, but I would like them well distanced or slightly distanced because of that reason for safety. So for that reason, Chair, if it's sufficient enough and you can guide me otherwise, I would not go with a recommendation to refuse and suggest that we as a committee approve this, referring point 3 back to the officers to make sure safety issues are dealt with. Thank you, Chair.
Members?
Sorry, Councillor, I understand what you're saying. If you could maybe elaborate just on why you believe this is the only site suitable yourself, rather I know the applicants have put forward their case, but if you expand on why this site is the only one suitable and one beside the farmhouse wouldn't be.
Well, I think, Darren, from my point of view would be the health and safety issues from being too near the farm buildings, and where I know we have to certainly encourage that at best, but I think health and safety for me overrides that sort of thing. And I do think they've mentioned even, you know, with hedges and not, you know, damaging land. I do believe in all seriousness that I think they're genuinely coming from the position that this is the best position on their site, and they believe in their heart of hearts that it's the only one, and for that reason I'm happy to go with that, if that's okay, Darren. Yeah.
I'll second that.
So we have a proposal contrary to the recommendation of the officer from Councillor Garrity and seconded by Councillor Feely. Are members all in agreement? Okay, well then in that case,
Support that. Yep, happy to support that, Chairman.
Councillor, yep, no problem, Councillor Rainey. In that case, I'm going to ask for a show of hands in support of the proposal to approve the application. And those, so those members, for the benefit of the voting in support, are Councillor McElduff, Councillor McGuire, Councillor Feely, Councillor Deehan, Councillor Coyle, Councillor Garrity, Councillor Campbell, and Councillor Rainey. And those against? And those against the recommendation are against the proposal by Councillor Garrity is Councillor Robinson, Councillor Thompson, and Councillor Irvine. Proposal is carried. I asked Darren to sum up.
Yeah. So the recommendation then was to refuse planning permission. Members have decided to grant planning permission for the reasons given. If I could ask that the application is then delegated back to officers just to resolve the issues regarding the third reason for refusal about road safety, as the applicant had said that that had been resolved. So we would seek amended plans, get those in, re-advertise, and then under delegated authority members, and we can proceed on. That's acceptable.
By Councillor Garrity, seconded by Councillor Feely. Okay, at this point, we're moving now to item 13, any urgent relevant business. I'm aware of one item of AOB. I'm going to ask Philip Kingston if he wishes to speak to this item.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this is just to update you in relation to a recent judgment that was handed down in a judicial review involving Derry City and Strabane District Council, but which has implications for planning committees for all 11 councils. I won't go into the details of the judicial review, but one issue which was discussed was whether or not planning decisions of councils would be subject or could be subject to call-in under the provisions which exist in the council's standing orders and which are provided for under section 41 of the Local Government Act. Now, members, you'll be aware that the standing orders for Fermanagh District Council and indeed for all 10 other councils have contained within them a provision which says that the decisions of council involving a quasi-judicial or a regulatory decision which is subject to an alternative appeal mechanism cannot be called in under standing orders or under section 41 of the Act. And all the councils had adopted that wording on advice which had been provided by what is now Department for Communities, and it reflected the wording which was within the draft standing orders regulations which came through. Now, in this particular case, the applicant who had been refused planning permission had contacted the council and asked if the decision could be called in under council standing orders. And the council had indicated that it couldn't be called in for a number of reasons. The first of those reasons being that it was call-in was a matter for elected members, not a matter for members of the public. Secondly, that in any event the call-in had been received out of time. And thirdly, that this was not the kind of decision that could not be called in. Now, the judge in this case accepted that the decision couldn't have been called in because it was a decision, because that was for the first two of those reasons, basically that it was for elected members, not for the applicant to seek to call it in, and in any event the request had come in outside of time. But he did then go on to consider the broader point, the judge went on to consider a broader point as to whether or not these decisions could be called in. Members, I'm sure in due course, if you wish, we can arrange for a copy of the judgment to be circulated to you. It hasn't yet been published on the Judiciary NI website, but it's considered just in 4 or 5 paragraphs in the middle of the judgment. And he basically has indicated that looking at Section 41 of the Local Government Act of 2014, that there is no basis for a council to exclude certain categories of decision from the mandatory reconsideration process. He took the view that Section 41 of the 2014 Act requires that council standing orders must make provision requiring reconsideration of a decision, and decision is not defined with any limitation. In the 2014 Act, it just simply says a decision of the council or a committee of the council. Now, he does go on to say that he accepts in his judgment that planning decisions are decisions where call-in process is particularly ill-suited, given its potential interference with third rights, and acknowledged that the councils had included this section on the basis of advice from the department. But he basically went to say that any limitation on the right of call-in had to be a question which had to be decided in legislation. And consequently, because of the wording of Section 41 as it currently stands, it wouldn't be lawful for a council to decide itself to disallow an otherwise valid call-in requisition, because it falls within a category which the council thought shouldn't be called in. So, members, that obviously has clear implications for councils and for this committee in particular, because it basically means that any decisions which are made by this committee would have to be considered provisional until such time as they have been subject to a call-in period. Also, it obviously also means that it is at least theoretically possible for a decision which has been made by this committee to be subject to a request for a call-in by other members of the council. I obviously have presented on this paper already to your colleagues in Derry City and Strabane District Council, and certainly the feeling there was that this was a matter of grave concern, and that representation should be made as soon as possible to the department to seek legislation to remedy this position, as was clearly the original intent. But I thought it was important that it was brought to members' attention at this stage, so as they were aware of the current issue. Happy to take any questions that members might have in relation to that.
Certainly important. Thank you, Philip, for that. Councillor Irvine.
Thanks very much, Philip. I was just trying to get my head around it, but I realise what you're talking about. It's a call-in for a council decision that is taken, or a motion that has gone forward. First of all, this cannot be applied retrospectively. Am I correct? That's the first question.
No, because the time has already passed for call-ins of any decisions that would have been made previously by this council. So the time for a call-in under council.
Following that, so there is no mechanism for any seemingly disaffected person trying to seek compensation then? That would be another question.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Right. Thirdly, the standing of this judge, or this judgment in this JR, the opinion coming forward from the judge, that now stands as material, isn't that correct?
It's certainly, yes, it's strictly speaking, it's what's called obiter, which means that it wasn't part of the actual decision in this case, because he reached his decision on other grounds where he, on this point, he'd found for the council. But it certainly would be highly influential in any decision.
So in other words, it's not
part of the decision, but it's an opinion expressed
Correct.
within the overall case.
Correct.
And it obviously has to have some weight then.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So really what you're saying is we now have to be completely aware of that going forward until I presume all 11 councils seek clarification from our sponsor department to actually get legislation put in place. My next question would be, if that was affirmative, how quickly can that take place?
Chair, through you, it's not straightforward because having discussed the matter with the barristers that were involved in the case and having considered the opinion, it does appear that originally the intention of the department was to deal with this issue in the standing orders regulations, which didn't make it through the assembly. The view is that this judgment would indicate, even if those regulations had been brought into effect, that in this respect they would also have been unlawful, and it requires a change in the primary legislation. So that means either that effectively means a change to the Local Government Act of 2014. Now that could be done by a review of the Local Government Act of 2014. I have spoken to the department and they have indicated that there would be nothing in the timetable which would allow such a change to be made before the May elections. So it would be something that would be looked at after that. One possible window in respect of which this could be dealt with is that, as members are aware, there is currently a review ongoing of the 2011 Planning Act. And I believe this council may indeed already have received some presentations on that and may have made some representations in respect of it. Now, it certainly wouldn't have been the intention that there would be substantive changes that would have been made as part of that review, but it certainly would be possible for a change to be included in the 2011 Act, which would then amend the 2014 Act.
And I think my last question just at the moment is, if the opinion now is that our decisions are subject to call-in under the primary legislation, or could be subject, and therefore there is a question, does that mean these decisions that we take could be called in by anybody on the council? Is that the interpretation?
Chair, again, through you, yes, essentially the council's standing orders would apply, and the council's standing orders reply that a requisition for a call-in can be made within 5 working days by 15% of the members of the council, which is 6 members of council. So provided 6 members were to make a request in writing within that time, which complied with the standing orders, then that would be the call-in.
Clarity on that. If they actually go for a call-in, which committee will the called-in item be presented in front of for reconsideration?
So council standing orders currently provide that where a call-in is made of a committee decision, that an ad hoc committee is set up which comprises the chairs and deputy chairs of the other council committees, and possibly the chair and deputy chair of the council. Can't quite remember off the top of my head, but they would consider the call-in initially. One of the options that is open to that committee is then to refer the matter back to the committee which had made the original decision, which in this case would be the planning committee. Should say this would apply equally to licensing applications, for example, entertainment licenses, amusement arcade licenses, and so on and so forth.
That's okay. That's enough for now. Thanks.
Okay. Significant development. No doubt we'll hear more about. Any more questions for Philip? Councillor Maguire.
Just one for clarification, Philip. Does this mean that any decision of the council, not just the planning committee, any decisions of councils can be called in now by this process, or are you specifically talking about planning applications?
This decision particularly affects a number of decisions. I mean, as you know, members, a number of the call-in process has been used in Fermanagh District Council on a number of occasions, possibly between 5 and 10 occasions since the council was formed. So council decisions can be called in. It's usually been notices of motion, decisions that have been made under notices of motion that can be called in. But council standing orders provided a series of categories of decisions which it was of the view could not be called in. And that included this particular category of decision, which was, as I say, decisions of council of a quasi-judicial or regulatory nature, which were subject to an alternative appeal mechanism. And because decisions which were made by this committee could have been appealed to the Planning Appeals Commission, the view was that planning decisions were therefore exempt from call-in by virtue of the standing orders. It's that aspect of things that has changed. It's those decisions which had been excluded under the standing orders would not now be excluded.
And again, does that mean now third party have right of appeal? Or
Basically, yes, it does basically offer. I mean, the call-in mechanism is only open to elected members. So it's not something whereby a third party could demand a call-in. But if a third party was to get 6 signatures from elected members, then that would call in a decision of the planning committee. There's no requirement for anybody to have some form of standing in the decision or anything like that, because ultimately it's the elected members that make the call in.
Thanks for that clarification.
Effectively, yeah. So effectively, Philip, going forward in the interim period, we need to be allowing, is it 2 days for the notice and 5 days for the period of that it can be called in? So 7 days, 7 working days we need to hold? Is that what we need to hold an application before we inform the successful applicant or the unsuccessful applicant?
It's 5 working days from the date of the, Kim may be able to provide more information on this than perhaps I am, but I think it's 5 working days from the issue of the draft minute. Kim may be able to provide some clarity in and around that.
5 working days from the issue of the action list. So that's our list of decisions, which is issued 2 days following a meeting. And in this case of planning committee, our process was that action list was circulated to planning committee members. This will now require that action list to be circulated to all councillors, and then we will have to wait for a 5-day period beyond that, but call-in period to expire before we would be able to issue any planning decisions. So there will be a bit of a delay now in that officers ordinarily would have actioned the issuing of decisions immediately following the committee. Will now require to be held to allow for the call-in period. We will also require to bring a report to committee on updating our standing orders to reflect this situation. So that's likely to happen in November as well.
Councillor Feely.
Thank you, Chair. It's taken me a while to get my head around this. This has come into law already. There's no way we can go against this now, because I think this is going to be a bit of a disaster now. So we've got if any councillor calling our decisions in the week after, it's going to be a pure disaster. Can we oppose this? No. There's nothing we can do. It's too late.
Philip's advice was that in effect this ruling is in effect already and has been the case really since transfer of planning powers, according to, if we apply it now to the legislation. I suppose what will be required here is that a call-in of a decision does not automatically mean that the decision is overturned. There will be a call-in, and there will have to be a consideration of the validity of that call-in against the 2 criteria, the legislation, and only if that is deemed to be a valid call-in will the decision then come back to the planning committee for reconsideration. So there are 2 specific grounds to be met. But yes, it will add another layer of potential challenge.
Councillor Garrity.
Yep, thanks, Kim and Philip and everybody. And I agree with Anthony. It'll be a mess, or the potential to cause a mess. And I know it is what it is now, Kim, but I suppose, should we, on advice from Philip, write to someone or put their concerns in writing officially from this committee to say there are grave concerns with this going forward, so at least it's documented? And I know nothing's going to be done anyway soon, with the hoops that have to be crossed to get this back to a sensible level. But if you could advise who would be best to report all that to, because I think we do have to put it in writing from this committee, because I think we're all singing the same hymn sheet here. It has potential to have disaster it all over it, as a proposal.
I would agree. Seconded, proposer seconded by Councillor Irvine.
Yeah, just a hypothetical question. If there was one of our decisions called in, it was proved valid and it came back for reconsideration in front of the committee, and the committee reconsidered it and then went for the same opinion, is that the matter finished? I see you nodding. Could you
Yeah,
get
yes,
confirmation
yes.
verbally?
No, you can't call. I mean, unless there was a completely different ground of calling. Yes.
Yep, that's okay. Thanks.
Yep. In the case of a refusal, the applicant would still have the Planned Appeals Commission then to pursue, but yeah, not in the case of an approval where an application was called in to be reconsidered. The objector then wouldn't have that. That'd be their last opportunity, really, outside of judicial review. Isn't that right, Philip? Only the applicant could appeal to the PAC.
Only the applicant could appeal to the PAC previously. Actually, this was a decision in respect of which the applicant could have appealed to the PAC and chose not to. They chose to seek to judicially review instead, on one of the grounds was that they wanted the opportunity to call in.
It's a lot of confusion as well in the current climate, where we have such transparency through public attendance at meetings and online, so it's a new dimension we hadn't seen coming, really. So I would support the proposal from Councillor Garrity and Councillor Bailey to write to the appropriate authority in relation to this. And who would be best to...
Well, Chair, if I may suggest, sorry, Kim, didn't mean to cut across.
No, go ahead.
No, if I may suggest, because of the current, perhaps quickest way of dealing this is as part of this review of the 2011 Act, that the appropriate correspondence might at this stage go to the Chief Planner.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Philip. No other comments in relation to that? Something to digest way home further. Thank you, Philip, for that information, and no doubt you'll have cast your eye over it a lot more, and we'll be speaking to you again soon on that. Thank you. Yep, we are all in agreement yet. We're all in agreement. Okay, members, any other items? Councillor, you're okay? Well, I do have one more thing before we go on. I want to acknowledge that Sinead McAvoy is moving on. Sinead McAvoy is moving on to the head of Waste Management Services. And I do want to put on record our committee's appreciation to Sinead for her work on this committee, and wish her well indeed in a very important role. No doubt she relishes the challenge and opportunity of leading up our waste management. And I wish Sinead well, and I thank her for her support to me as chairperson as well. And I also want to wish, I know I mentioned this at the last meeting, wish Paul McDermott well in his role as lead principal planning officer. I'm sure I speak on behalf of the whole committee as well in wishing Paul well for that. So thank you. Thanks, members, for your attendance and patience throughout the wee technical issues earlier. And the meeting is now ended. Thank you.